I just saw The Encampments, the film from Breakthrough News, and I was impressed that the students were acting in conscience. I came away from the film wondering what is more unsettling, the obvious mindset hallucinations of a police officer who would fire rubber bullets at students who were commendably occupying a building in protest of their university's involvement in genocide. My father was at that university with Eisenhower. He was a human rights professor. Well, he drove a school bus in retirement. Clearly, I know what I'm talking about when I say he was on the student side. School buses were used in deaf precedent now to lock down the school of Gallaudet when the students wanted a deaf administrator and protested that they didn't have one. What is more unsettling, the policeman's hallucinations that would lead him to fire at students when there were actual criminals firing rockets at them, or the false, the, the mindlessness and I wrote down my thought. The mindlessness and meaninglessness of false meaning being given to the students. What's more unsettling? Because there's certain obvious parallels that Breakthrough News isn't talking about. Alternative media almost certainly is reading from a script the way mainstream media is. It's just a little bit different. That's what I want to talk about because the police, the LAPD, resembled no one so much as Hamas attacking the supernova rave. The encampments showed the symbiosis that existed between the rave and the people of Gaza. But the sandwich between people who know me realize that my main concern is campus safety from Hollywood malefactors. And it isn't just an idle irony that Japanese avant-garde was being sold as a preview film to the encampments, and Yoko Ono's new thing coming out with about John Lennon. Students at Columbia aren't going to mingle with me about that. It's established that even the Palestinians don't want me. But even despite the fact that they don't think so, I am part of their cause because campus safety has been violated towards me very gravely. Not only was I kidnapped and tortured from out of a Pittsburgh public school, and then spun into this weaponized storyline that's supposedly part of the big shared story of the generation because it involves those two perilous people. Um, but campus safety is a consideration because a school is only good as the quality of its students. I know it's difficult for administrators and grant writers to keep that in mind, but it was the quality of the anonymous students who were involved that make or break Columbia. we can no more do without quality students at schools than we can do without bees and farming. And the same forces that are exterminating callously will do away with either. And that's what we're up against. And it's strange to be in such disorienting and dissociative times. But I do think I can shed some light on why the sandwich of the supernova rave in Gaza, because it was the same people hitting both of them from two sides, but it was one planning operation. Bacani talks about it in a book that was written years before the supernova rave massacre. And as I say, the rave massacres have a history around here. We even have a land location designator about the supernova up here. And it shows that Putin was in on it. The occupation situation at Columbia resembles like a Russian school. We're not allowed to transgress. Well, I think I can shed some light on the way that the sandwich goes, because I would rather argue with people about the meaning of sex and death than fight with them. I think academic differences of opinion or discussion about things. I know that a lot of people in Gaza feel that way. They didn't want this to happen. They would never in a million years have attacked an encampment like the supernova rave. Any more than they would attack an encampment shooting rubber bullets at Los Angeles universities. But it has to do with the way that Nosferatu and his partners like Trump and Roger Waters think and spell out what they do. Like the fascism of shared stories. Like, how do you get people's idealisms to play into the hands of their enemies? Well, Patton said, let the other son of a bitch die for his religion, or something like that. And the idea, I think, was to meditate on what the shared story will be and take possession of it in advance and use that shared story as a copycat synopsis of the play action so that they accept. And it's based on, I've read what they think about. I've read not so much Ouspensky as Gurdjieff. He has this very important to them story about this guy who rings a bell, wakes up the town. But before he does it, he curses every man and his mother. He's like a witch. He curses everybody. And then he rings the bell and goes about his business. He's a perfectly peaceful person. Somebody asks him, what is this phenomenon? Why do you do that? He says, because they wake up and curse me through the ESP as the man waking them from sleep too early. They've got to go to work. And I have to contradict the evil spirit. And so Roger Waters goes out and calls Trump a pig, oink, oink. And then he slaps five with Trump because they control the narrative. So and the bell ringer is something not just Gurdjieff, but Noam Chomsky has something like that, where he says, why suppress freedom of speech when if you let them holler, they won't do anything. That's good enough for them. Let's just tell them and they'll say, so what? And it's like this liturgical mode. Like when Kennedy was killed, somebody said, oh, man passes, man passes. Praise God that we had him as long as we did. Let's move on. The draft board has lots of clergy, chaplains. So, like the Hamas Palestine storyline that the Michael Johnson people sell to the policeman who fires rubber bullets at the students of the supernova encampment. I mean, of the encampment rave, is the idea that, like, well, when they shot that fascist leader in the motorcade in Czechoslovakia, the fascists took it out on the partisans, took it out against the partisans on the ordinary Czechoslovakian people. But it was still a noble deed. Well, this is the storyline that people like to. We don't, it was an uprising, a slave uprising, but it wasn't. No, the supernova rave and the bombing of Gaza was, like I was saying about Baccani, in that old book from before this happened, years before this happened, on page 247 or something. Just look up Trump in the index. This was before October 7th, but Trump was in the index negotiating with Hamas because he saw the brilliant way that negotiating with Hamas could empower Egypt and curtail the Muslim Brotherhood, who were making inroads from Arab Spring. So this was all stomping on encampment raves and Arab Spring and stuff. So Turn was behind it, and that's why there's a fascism of shared narratives that goes on. It's like they say in movie theaters that are scary, it's only a movie, it's only a movie. That's what you're supposed to keep thinking. And then when critical conscience comes along, people are told your life will be a better movie if you go along with it. You'll have more peace of mind. And people don't understand why they should be backed against a wall to prove their principles if it's completely senseless. Well, the reason is because to fascists who are making money and planning to commit ethnic cleansing to build siesta resorts, it's not for no reason. And they've shown what they'll do to administrators like Harvard who get in their way. So Donald Trump, like the Hamas storyline is really an attempt to prevent the encampments from solidifying sympathies and common sense with Gaza. It divides. It's the sandwich factor. That's why they have it by sandwich star, the supernova here locator, and cosmonaut, because they make people conform to a script, and they leave out what really happened. They leave out that Nosferatu was well aware that Egypt and Donald Trump had arranged with Hamas to give him his golden pretext for a Holocaust program. I warned the people like Breakthrough News in 1994 that Israel was embarked on a genocide program, and people didn't consider it. Students were risk rates. Now, I saw that MAS stands for Muslim American Students, or Muslim Association of some sort in the movie. Well, MAS were the initials of that girl from Bard. And the idea is that sexual licentiousness is out. It's out of everybody who's agreed that the shared story is, the whole idea of the shared story was hot-wired towards Cyril Wecht and Vince Irene in Pittsburgh. And they completely demolished the reality of what took place. I had been kidnapped and tortured and pedophiled, and that I had been coaxed back into believing that boyfriend and girlfriend and dating meant living together, and that was normal, that it wasn't sin. And they set this up for the Amalek of AIDS, you know. And when I went to the administration of the school, really on bended knee, and said, "This is terrible. We should be looking into this." They told me, "Put your hands behind your back," and arrested me. And they were doing that on behalf of people like George Galloway and John Lennon. Why would they do that? You know, because Václav Havel found the whole thing terribly entertaining. We can't have those kinds of things compromising campus security. What they did to me was an early play action in what they did to Mahmoud. They jumped out of stolen cars and grabbed me on the streets at 12-year-olds, tortured and gassed me. And then when I tried to report that someone else might be at risk, they told me, "Put your hands behind your back." And both of them were pit men. Both of them were pit men. Then you come up with pit, sin war, sin war. And these are people who were working with Nosferatu's gang. I mean, the Israelis in that movie that you see, it's just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? I mean, it's just what we're up against with those berserkers is out of a science fiction movie of some kind, but it's real, and it doesn't help not to know what really happened.